Hello, this is Minder Chen. I'm professor of Management Information System at Smith School of Business Economics, CSU Channel Island. In this lecture, we're going to talk about leaderships. Leadership is about leading people and organization. And providing leadership is part of the leading category within the POLC framework. Making decisions, communicating, working in team, and motivating people are all part of this leading category. And leadership certainly has a lot to do with the people's perspective in management. Here's the learning objective, including define leadership, identify trait and behavior of effective leader, understand how context or situation may influence the effectiveness of different leadership style, and explain some contemporary theory in leaderships, including transformational leaderships and servant leadership. So what is leadership? Leadership in an organization or leader in an organization develop the vision, creates the environment within the organization, the culture, and inspire individual and the team to pursue goal and consistently achieve result substantially greater than what they would on their own. And basically, leader can inspire people so they work together to achieve better and higher goal. And this can be achieved within the framework of the organization's value and aim at the realization of organization's vision. Let me just point out, sometimes you will see comparison between leadership and management. And certainly in this course, we consider leadership as really part of the principles of management. And some people also differentiate leader and manager. And here's just one example between leadership and management. You will see the traditional planning, organizing, controlling, budgeting, scheduling, pay attention to detail as part of the management related issue. But on the leadership side, you will see something like inspiring, motivating, creating, innovating, vision. In this course, sometimes we use the term manager and leader interchangeably. However, to emphasize the importance of some leadership specific attribute, we do occasionally use leadership or leaderships in a more narrow sense, such as being listed here. Once again, leadership, with a shorter definition, is an act of influencing other people to work towards a group goal. So the group can be a small group, teams, a department, or a whole company, or even a whole country. And they're so-called formal leader. They hold a position of authority, official authority, and may utilize the power come with their positions and to influence others. And certainly sometimes they have their own personal power, their charisma, and others to influence others other than their official power. They are so-called informal leaders. They are without a formal position of authority within the organization, but they demonstrate leadership by influencing others through personal forms of powers. Here's, I added this alert. Sometimes you yourself in the organization, you may not have a really high, powerful official position, but because of your networking, your expertise, you may become a so-called informal leader. People look up for you. That certainly is a good thing, but be careful not to threaten the formal leaders. Otherwise, you may get into trouble. So we're always wondering, since there's management related to the issue, we're always wondering what makes someone a great leader. And people have been trying to figure this out. What makes someone become a leader? And the others, and what makes someone a good leader, which means what can someone be trained to become an effective leaders. And so this has been studied for a long time. So let's see what scholar, researcher, or practitioner has come up with. Main way that management researchers have tried to explain what makes someone a good leader, there's kind of three category of theory. One is the trait theory, which is like personality theory, like what kind of personality or attribute people born with make them a born leaders. The behavior theories, we focus on what the leader does, and in this case, we look at their behaviors, and hopefully we can train someone to behave like most of the great leaders behave. Last is what we call contingency theory. Contingency theories indicate that situation may determine which traits or behaviors are more effective under different situations. Let's look at the trait versus the behavior theory of leaderships. This is the debate between the born leader, or the leader can be made or trained, or be prepared and trained to be a leader. Trait theory, the basic idea is some people are born to be a leader and some people are not. This means that if you're not a born leader with the right trait, you cannot be even trained to be an effective leader. And certainly it's hard for us to believe this. But certainly the earliest leadership theory, the trait theory, indicates such. Behavior theories, the basic idea is that most people can be effective leader if they learn to do the right things, which means some of the behavior stuff can be trained. This means that the leader are made, which means can be trained through their behavior. So what do you think? Which theory that you subscribe to? I actually asked a good friend of mine just the other day this question, and he kind of voted 80 to 20, which means he believed that 80% of the good leader came from their trait, and 20 maybe from something that can be trained, the behavior side of it. This is a leadership model that I have obtained from a company. The company since acquired and kind of out of business, so I kind of take the liberty to use it. And in this nice leadership model, which I find it to be useful, summarized first are some fundamental traits for good leader, and also describe some attribute which is more related to the behavior side of the leadership theory, and that's been listed here. And in this triangle right on the top here, at the center is the knowledge and skill. Leaders still need domain knowledge, some functional area knowledge and skill, and also knowledge and skill about their industry, the human behavior. And one I think very important is, I call it the wisdoms about human nature. Understanding human nature is very important to management and definitely to leaderships. Good communication skill. Most of the good leader has really good communication skill. And the last, not the least, is the business orientation, particularly in the business world. Understand the business and interesting in running a business is important for somebody to become a great leader. We're going to talk about the fundamental traits and the leadership's attribute and knowledge and skills in the following. So keep this model in mind. It's a good way to put a lot of things we discussed together. The fundamental traits, traits theory, your personal character, personality, willingness to learn, high self-esteem, being confident, feel comfortable with who you are, know yourself. We mentioned this multiple times. And have a desire and courage to lead. You may wonder why somebody don't want to be a leader. I can give you some time. I may be in a situation I don't want to lead because leaders need to take a lot of responsibility. Although there's certainly certain reward and fame that come with the leadership position, but the responsibility may be too huge. If you don't think you have the capability or capacity at that time to take that leadership position, you may deny the offer to step in to become a leader. But a great leader do need to have the desire and courage to lead. Great leaders are transformational. We'll talk about something called transformational leadership, but for now, transformational means they have the desire, the courage, the capacity to initiate and implement innovative change. Positive attitude on a lot of things about people, about how things may go, how they respond to the changing environment. And have the energy. A lot of great leaders has great energy. They can work long hours and still enjoy the work. And that's, in many situations, that's important for a great leadership. And how about the leadership attribute, which is on the behavior side of it? Need to have a strong personal conviction about the vision and mission of the company. Is a visionary, can see the futures before most of the people, can generate some emotional bonds with the follower, inspirational, it's very team-oriented, and they usually are risk takers, and they have the drive to excel in any field they enter. Let me give you just a few examples from Apple and Steve Jobs in particular. As you can see here, this is kind of a window or dialog box from Macintosh, the old Macintosh. You will notice that the dialog box actually has this kind of rounded corners, rectangle, and it's easier actually to design a straight rectangle shapes for dialog box. So the programmer was not really happy and didn't want to actually build this rounded corner rectangle dialog box. And however, Steve Jobs really wanted to have something which is not as sharp at the corner. So he he talked to the programmer, showed him a lot of artifacts in the office on the street, which all have this kind of rounded cornered shapes, and finally convinced his designers and the programmer to adopt this shape, which in later psychological research actually find that this rounded corner shape require less cognitive cost on the user. And so if you really look at a lot of products now from Apple and certainly from other computer companies as well, they all have this kind of rounded corners in its shape. A great leader is the one that can take criticism, although personally, by reading Steve Jobs' biography, I felt that in most of the time he was pretty arrogant. But in some instance, like listed here, he actually is humble enough, in some rare case, I may mention, that to take different opinion with positive view. In this case, actually, for Macintosh, there's two suppliers for the disk, and then Steve Jobs chose a smaller vendor, Apps Electronics, instead of Sony. And however, the project manager Bob decided it's best to go with Sony, but he couldn't really confront Steve on this final decision, so he secretly still worked with Sony to get the disk drive ready, and eventually the vendor of choice by Steve Jobs, Apps, didn't really deliver the necessary disk in time. But by that time, the backup plan from Sony come to the rescue. Steve actually swallowed his pride and thanks the project team for disobeying him and doing the right things. So this is a situation that the leaders need to respect people who stand up against him. In the Macintosh team, in the early day, there's an annual award for the person who best stood up to Jobs. And the award is called Adams Award. That's kind of interesting. Adams and Apple Computer. That's the connection. And actually, a lot of some people who received the award actually got promoted because Steve Jobs, although think really highly of himself, but also like people who can kind of argue with him on some logical ground. And Steve is considered to be a very persuasive guy. They even come up with a term called reality distortion field. Even you may not agree with him, but when he can talk you into something that he wants you to do. So Steve Jobs is considered a very charismatic leader. And so this reality distortion field, you can it's kind of in exhibition in a lot of product launch by Apple when Steve Jobs was still alive. Here's some more recent research on some of the leadership behavior. There's 20 of them. You can dig out this report from McKinsey. And I just want to point out just a few of them highlighted here. A great leader are very supportive to its subordinates. They operate with a strong result orientation, and they seek and respect different perspective. We just mentioned Steve Jobs' case. And they have the ability to solve problems effectively. Knowledge and skill for leadership, for good leaders. We mentioned wisdom about human nature. We mentioned in that triangle, the three sides of the triangle is wisdom about human nature, ability to listen and communicate with different stakeholders, and has the business orientation, the person who understands external factors and align resources to attain a balanced scorecard. And it's also very important for great leader to be able to build trust of various stakeholders, including his subordinate. This certainly takes time and sincerity in order to get there. And also great leader is the one that can delegate and empower its subordinate to get things done and train the next generation of leadership. Team building is another important knowledge and skill. We'll talk about group and teams in another unit. Nurturing is an attitude of caring and promoting development of individual and team to ensure their success. Create vision, we mentioned visioning. And another important skill is dealing with ambiguity. Remember the yin and yang. Sometimes the issue that you're dealing with always has some pro and con. And there's a lot of ambiguity because of lack of information. And so your ability to balance things that are seemingly at odds and it's very important. You need to kind of use exploration and discovery kind of a mechanism to kind of figure it out in very ambiguous situations. And when situations arise, sometimes you need to be very decisive. Decisiveness doesn't really mean that you make the decision alone or you take all the decision, but it really means that sometimes because the time constraint, although you consult with people, but you need to make a decision and make a decision quick. Change management is something we just mentioned. It's very important for leader because we bring in leader because a lot of time company need to make some major changes. And the leadership change is in order. And then the new leader come in actually has the mandate to make the change. Therefore, change management skill become very important in such situation. And emotions and emotional intelligence is very important for a great leader. And please go to this Harvard Business Review website. There's a free survey or quiz that you can take to measure your own emotional intelligence as a good leader. And also Daniel Goleman, who I believe is the one really behind this emotional quotients or emotional intelligence movement, has an article on Harvard Business Review describe what makes a leaders, and definitely from the emotional intelligence perspective. So let's look at briefly what Daniel Goleman has said regarding what makes a leader. He proposed a framework which has 4 components arranged in the 2x2 matrix. One is self-awareness, to aware your own emotion. and be able to accurately assess your own emotion and have the confidence of understanding your own emotions. Self-management is once you understand your emotion, you can control your emotion to some degree of transparency, and then your emotion can be adjusted based on the situation. And there's always some degree of optimism in your view of the world. And if we move from the individual to the group, then the social awareness becomes very important. You need to have empathy, empathize with others. You have the skill or knowledge and attitude to be aware of the situation of the organization and have the service orientation. Last not the least building block is this relationship management, which means you develop your skill in influence other people and become an inspirational leader, that you know how to develop other younger generation to become the new leaders. And you're the change catalyst, which you facilitate change in your company, and you know how to deal with conflict when it arises in the organization or in the team. Working in team, collaborate with others is also an important skill, which will be covered in a future unit. So those 4 categories include self-awareness, self-regulation, social skills, and that relationship management that include empathy, and then motivations. Motivating other people are also very important. If you study the article, the original Harvard Business Review article, let's just put out social skill as an example. Social skill means proficiency in managing relationship and building network. It's an ability to find common ground and build rapport with people that you work with. And social skill really means that you're very effective in leading change, and you're very persuasive, and also you have the expertise in building and leading team. Okay, that's it for this first part of this leadership lecture. Thank you. Bye-bye.